Hi there and welcome to Tech Life, a channel where I aim to review everything from selfie sticks to laptops to IDs for coding, video editing, software producing thumbnails, essentially anything tech related. If you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing. If you have anything that you think I should review, please let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to review that product. In this video, we will be looking at iteration statements in C#. Iteration statements are often called or sometimes called loops or looping statements. In program, we quite often have to loop over or iterate over the same lines of code in order to produce a certain result or outcome. And in order to do so, we have a number of different constructs that C# provides for us, and we'll be looking at those. In particular, we'll be looking at things like the for loop, the while loop, the do while loop, and the for each loop. So let's start by looking at the for loop first. If I can just bring up a flowchart diagram. So with the for loop, we first have a look at a condition, we evaluate a condition, and if that condition is true, then we'll execute the body of the loop. We'll increment a condition, and then we'll loop around to test the condition again. And this for loop, will continue looping as long as the condition is true. As soon as the condition becomes false, then the program will jump out of the loop and go and execute the statement after the loop. Okay, let's have a quick look at a typical for loop statement. So from here we can see that the very first thing we do is use the keyword for, and then we have the open parentheses. Within the parentheses we have three sections separated by commas. The very first one is it says initialization, but it's actually we actually declare a variable and we initialize that variable, and this variable acts as a counter. The second part of this for loop statement is a condition. So this is the thing that we evaluate to determine whether we're going to run the code that sits within the curly braces. And then the last part of this statement is we increment the variable that we declare. So if we just quickly run through this, so if we come along here and the condition is true, then everything that sits within these curly braces is executed, and then the code loops round, the variables are incremented, and then the condition is evaluated again. If the condition is still true, then the code runs again. The code within these curly braces is run again, and then it loops around, and the variable is incremented again. Again, the condition is evaluated, and if it's true, it does the same again. But if it's false, then what happens is then none of the code within these curly braces is executed, and any code that may exist beyond these curly braces is then executed. So that is a very simple for loop. Next up is the while loop. The while loop continuously executes one or more statements as long as the loop condition is satisfied. Let's have a quick look at a typical flowchart. So the program flow comes in here. This condition is evaluated. If it's true, we execute the code within the body and we loop around and we evaluate the code, the condition again. If it's true, we'll keep looping until it's false, and then we drop out of the loop and we'll execute any statements that appear after the while loop statements. We can have a quick look at a while loop statement. A typical while loop statement in C# will look like this. It will begin with the keyword while. We have open and close parentheses, and then within those parentheses we will have a condition that we evaluate. If that condition evaluates true, then any code sitting within the curly braces is executed, and the code loops round to evaluate the condition again. So as long as this condition is true, then this code within the curly braces is executed. As soon as the condition within the parentheses is deemed to be false, then the execution of code drops out of the while loop, and any code that exists, any statements that exist after the while loop are then executed. And next up we have the do while loop. It's very similar to the while loop, but there is a very distinct difference, and I'll explain that in a second. Do while loop executes one or more statements, again multiple times, as long as the loop condition is satisfied. As I say, it's very similar to the while loop, but the while loop has the test condition at the start of the loop. So a while loop will test the condition at the start, and if that test condition evaluates as false, then the while loop will never execute. The difference with the do while has the condition at the bottom, at the end of the loop structure. So the do while will always execute at least once. So that is the difference between the while loop and the do while loop. Let's have a quick look at a flowchart diagram. So here we can see right at the top here, we actually execute the body of the loop first, and then we test the condition. So the body of the loop, the code within the body of the loop will always, in a do while, execute at least once. Once that code is executed, then we'll test the condition. If the condition is still true, then we'll loop around and then we'll execute the code again. If, however, the condition is false, then any statements after the do while statement will then be executed. And the typical do while statement looks like this. So we use the keyword do. We have the open curly braces, and within those braces we'll have one or more statements which get run straight away, and then at the end of the do while statement we will have the condition that we evaluate. If this condition is false, then the code will not loop back, and it will simply continue past the do while code and execute any statements that exist after that. If, however, this condition is true, then the code will loop around, and the code within the curly braces will then get executed again before the condition is evaluated again. So that is the do while loop in C#. And lastly, we are going to look at the for each loop. And let me just quickly bring up a flowchart of the for each loop. So a for each loop executes one or more statements for all the elements within a collection. Collections in C# are things like arrays and lists. For this particular tutorial, don't get too bogged down with collections, because we are just going to look at the actual iteration methods. There is an upcoming video where I will be explaining collections, arrays, lists, etc. So this flowchart shows that C# tries to evaluate whether elements within a collection have yet to be iterated over. And if this condition evaluates is true, then statements are run, and then the code loops back to the condition again, and that condition then again is evaluated to see if it's true or false. As long as elements within a collection, within an array, have yet to be iterated over, then the condition is true, and therefore statements within the for each loop are executed. As soon as all the elements within a collection have been iterated over, then the condition is false, and therefore any lines of code after the for each loop are then executed, and the code continues from there. Let's have a quick look at a typical C# for each statement. So here we can see that we use the keyword for each. Then we have the open and close parentheses. Within the parentheses, we declare a variable. and we give that variable a type. All variables have types, and then we pass in the name of a collection, either a name of an array or a list. And so what C# does here is it says take the first element of the array in this array name, and pass it into the variable name over here, and then run any lines of code that may exist between the open and close curly braces. Then loop back round, and again evaluate to see if there are any other elements within this array that have not yet been iterated over. As long as there are elements within this array that have yet to be iterated over or have not yet been processed, then they will each in turn get passed into the variable. The variable will then get passed down into the code within these curly braces, and whatever code sits in here will get executed. As soon as all the elements within the array name over here have been iterated over, then the for each evaluates to a false, and then code that may exist after these curly braces is then run. Okay, so let's fire up Visual Studio, and we can code up some of these iteration constructs. We will create a new project. It's going to be a console application, and we'll give it a name. Give it a name. I'll just call it loops. I'll call it looping. Cool. I'll give Visual Studio a second or two to put a skeleton project together for us. Okay, and the next thing we'll do is we'll create our own class. So we'll get rid of that one. Right click. And we are going to add, we're going to add a new item. And it's going to be a class. And we're going to give this a name. This class is going to be called loops. Cool. So the namespace is looping, the class is loops. The next thing we do, we should all know this by now, is we're going to add the main method, which is static, as void because it doesn't return anything. Capital M for main, open and close parentheses, and we're going to put in some curly braces here. Our code will sit within these curly braces. I'm going to write to the console. So I'm going to say console.writeLine, open and close parentheses, open and close, inverted commas, first 10 whole numbers. We finish this line off with a semicolon, and we're going to use the keyword for, open and close parentheses, and within this we are going to firstly declare a variable. That variable is of type integer, so it's int, and I'm going to give that variable name the letter I, and I'm going to also initialize this variable, and I'm going to initialize it to a value of 1. The next thing we do is place a semicolon, and here we can say as long as I is less than or equal to 10 I plus plus. So let me explain what we've done here. So this is a for loop. We declare a for loop by using the keyword for. Within the parentheses, we declare a variable. In this case, we've declared a variable of a type int. We have named that variable and we've given the name as I, and we're saying I currently the value is the current value of I is 1. Okay, so the condition that this for loop is going to evaluate, as long as I is less than or equal to 10, this for loop will iterate. Every time it does iterate, it will evaluate this condition. If it's true, it will go ahead and run the statements that we're going to place below the for loop, but it will also increment the value of I. So eventually, I will get to being more than 10. When I exceeds the value of 10, then this for loop will stop iterating, and any code we place after that will then get run. So let's put in some curly braces, and we're just simply going to write to the console. We're going to say console. I'm going to spell it correctly first. Console dot write line, and all I'm going to do is output the value of I. I'm going to come to here and I'm going to say console and dot read key. So we can still see the console the console window when the application stops running. So let's see what this does. If I hit F5, okay, you should be able to see that the output is a list of numbers between 1 and 10. So essentially it's just output the value of this variable. So it started off as being 1, and then as this loop iterated, we incremented the value of I, and every time we did increment that, we output the value to the console. So we had a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 down here. So that is a for loop, a very simple for loop. Okay, so next up we will have a look at the while loop, and I think I can retain some of this code. We'll get rid of the for loop. I'll make some space up here, and I'll declare a variable. It's going to be of type integer. It's going to be called I again, and we'll initialize the value of I to 1, and not forgetting to add the semicolon. So the console.write line can stay, and then we can use the keyword while, open and close parentheses. So we're going to say while I, again, while I is less than or equal to 10, do something, and whatever it's going to do will be sitting within these curly braces. And again, it's going to be a simple console.write line, and we're going to display the value of I to the console. And we have to remember to increment, oops, this is not 1, this is I. We have to ensure that we increment the value of I, otherwise we'll create an indefinite loop. And we're going to say I plus plus. Okay, so let me just explain what we've done. At the top, we've declared a variable of type integer. We've said the value of I is going to be 1. Then we output a message to the console, and then we use a keyword while, and we're saying while I is less than or equal to 10, do everything that sits within these curly braces. So the first thing it's going to do is print the value of I to the console, and then it's going to increment the value of I. So the code will loop around to here again, and this time the value of I will be 2, and this will continue until we get to exceed the value of 10. So let's see that in practice. F5, and as you can see, we have a list of numbers between 1 and 10 listed again, very similar to the output that we saw for the for loop, but this time we used a while loop. Just a point to note, the while loop, if the value of if this condition was not met, so for instance, if the value of I was 11, then this while loop would never run. So I've said here I is equal to 11, while I is less than or equal to 10, then do something. So if I can place a console, not right. Okay. So what I did here was I initialized the value of the integer I to 11. When we came down to the while loop, we looked at the value of I and we said is I less than or equal to 10, and so this evaluated to false. So none of these statements were run, and only the code after the while loop was run. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because we're going to talk about the do while next, and we'll see the difference between the two. Okay, so now we're going to look at the do while loop, and I am going to firstly reset the value of I to 1. We can leave the console.write line in place, and I'm going to get rid of this. So the do while loop starts with a keyword do, and then we have the open and close parentheses. And within this, I'm going to put some code, and I'm going to put the console.write, and we're going to output the value of I as we've been doing. And I'm going to increment the value of I. And then we are going to use the keyword while, open and close parentheses, I is less than equal to 10. Okay. So this is very similar to the while loop, but this loop will always run at least once. So the code at the start will initialize the value of I to 1. We will output something to the console, and then we will enter the loop and print out the value of I. In this case, the first time round is going to be 1. Next, we're going to increment the value of I, and then the condition is evaluated. So the condition in the do while is evaluated at the bottom of the iteration, whereas with most of the other looping constructs, the condition is evaluated at the top, and depending on whether that is true or false, then the statements within the braces are run. So the do while loop evaluates the condition at the bottom. Therefore, the do while loop will always run at least once. So let's see this running and comment this out. F5 to run. Okay, again we have a list of numbers 1 to 10, and that was to be expected. So now I'm going to quickly change the value of the integer I, and I'm going to change it to 11. So now I'm saying I is equal to 11, but the condition is if I is less than or equal to 10. But because the condition is evaluated at the bottom of the loop, we will see at least one iteration of this loop before the condition is evaluated, and then the loop will drop out to the statements after the curly braces. So let's see this running. Okay, so it's printed the number 11 because we've set the value of I to equal 11, and then as this comment evaluated this condition, it's evaluated the condition to false and then dropped out of the loop. So it's only run once, but it will always run once. The do while loop will always run once, whereas most of the other looping constructs within C# will not necessarily run at all, depending on the condition. And lastly, we're going to have a look at the Foreach loop. I'm going to introduce something called an array in this loop, but don't worry about that. As I say, we're going to look at arrays, collections, lists, etc. in the very next video. But I just wanted to show you this for each loop, and the best way to do it is to create this array. So I'm going to get rid of this line, and we get rid of the do while. And the first thing we will do is create that array, and I'm going to create an array, and it's going to be of type integer. I'm going to give that array a name, and we can call it whole numbers. Whole num. And we have an equal sign, and we have the keyword new, and then the keyword int, and the square braces. We're going to follow these braces up with curly braces, and we're going to put in values for each element of this array, and it's going to be simply a count up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's a count up to 10, and we're going to finish this line off with a semicolon. So that's an array. The array is called whole num. It's of type integer, and it's got 10 elements. Each element contains one integer. The first element contains 1, the second 2, the third 3, all the way up to 10. And now we're going to use the keyword for each. Open and close parentheses. We're going to have a type int, and we're going to declare the name of that integer as I. The keyword in is used, and then we're going to use the name of this array. So I'm going to copy and paste that into here. Next we'll have the open and close braces, and we're going to have a console.write line. and we're going to output the value of I to the console. So let me explain what we've done. We output a message to the console. We've created an array. It's called whole num. It's of type integer, and we've passed in 10 integers, so one number in each element of the array, so there's 10 elements. We've used the keyword for each. We've declared a variable, and it's of type int. The variable name is I, and then we pass in the name of the collection, the name of the array, which is whole num. So every time this for each iterates, it's going to come to here. It's going to say, are there any elements within this array that have not been processed yet? If so, take the value from one of those elements, place it into this integer I, and then output the value of this I using this console.writeLine. Okay, F5 to run. See this in action. And there we go. We've got a list of numbers between 1 and 10, and these have come straight out of the array that we've created. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this video up here. So this short video was on iterating constructs within C#, sometimes called loops. We looked at the for loop, the while loop, the do while loop, and the for each loop. We saw that most of the looping constructs evaluated their conditions at the start of the loop. The exception to this was the do while loop, which means that the do while loop will always iterate once. I hope this video has been helpful to you. If so, please do consider subscribing and hitting the like button. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in the next one. Thank you.